Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2017 hurricane season webinar sponsored by ARRL. This is Mike Corey, KI1U. I'm the ARRL Emergency Preparedness Manager, and I'll be your host and moderator tonight. Before I introduce our panel of, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the ARRL YouTube channel, hopefully later this week. 2-hour block reserved on the webinar platform, but our plan is to conclude this in about an hour and a half. 2 hours is just a little long for a webinar. So we'll shoot for an hour and a half. Our platform allows the audience to post questions to the moderator during the webinar. Please use this tool to send in your questions. We will address them as we go and then do a final Q&A session, any that we may have missed. If for some reason your question does not get answered during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to the appropriate presenter by email, and we'll provide information towards the end of the session. Tonight we've got a great lineup of speakers for you. First, we're going to hear from Bob Robichaud, VE1 MBR from the Center. Bob will provide us with a meteorological overview of this year's Atlantic hurricane season. We'll then hear from Julio Ripoll, WD4R, National Hurricane Center, WX4NHC. Sean Kutzko, KX9X, the ARRL Media and Public Relations Manager, will then discuss key points about working in hurricane response. Rob Macedo, KD1CY, will cover the role of VoIP Hurricane Net. Bobby Graves, KB5HA, gave us an overview of Hurricane Watch Net, which recently celebrated 50 years of service. And new for this year is SATERN. We'll hear from National SATERN Liaison, Bill Feist, BZH. Finally, I will go over the role of ARRL headquarters during hurricane response. So without further ado, I will turn it over to VE1 MBR. Just one second. Okay, Bob, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Good evening, everyone. Bob Robichaud, I'm a meteorologist with the Canadian Hurricane Center, and as Mike mentioned, my call sign is Victor Echo 1 Mike Bravo Romeo, and I'm just going to present you what's going on in the tropics right now, both in the Pacific and in the Atlantic, and we'll look at some of the factors influencing this hurricane season, especially so far, and then we'll take a look at what's going on or what we can expect in the next couple of weeks and even beyond for the entire hurricane season. Things are a little active, as you will see as we go on here. Starting in the Eastern Pacific, we actually have a major hurricane out there called, and it's been a major hurricane for a day or so, a couple of days, and now it's starting to weaken just a little bit. So we're expecting over the next few hours or so. There's also newly formed as of today Tropical Depression 7, which is the one here, and there's also an area of interest kind of in the middle of these two storms. So that's what's going on in the Eastern Pacific. So I mentioned Fernanda, and this is the track forecast as issued by the National Hurricane Center in Miami. As you can see, we still expect it to be a major hurricane in the evening hours, and it's a Category 3 right now, but should weaken a little bit as we head into the overnight hours. And we also have, as I mentioned, newly formed a Tropical Depression 7, which could become a Tropical Storm Greg essentially any time now. However, none of these are currently a threat to land at this point. In the Atlantic, we have a new tropical storm as of late this afternoon, early evening, Tropical Storm Dawn. Reconnaissance aircraft flew into this area of disturbed weather over the afternoon hours, and that there was a closed center of circulation, and that's why they declared it a tropical storm after that aircraft flew into the storm. So based on the predictions from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, we expect that storm to continue on a westerly trend. At this point, it doesn't look like it's going to reach hurricane status, but certainly something that we'll be watching over the next couple of days. So this hurricane season in the Northeast Pacific, we've had 6 named storms, not counting that tropical depression 7, which could become great at any time. So we've had, like I say, 6 named storms. 3 of those only made it to tropical storm status, while the other 3 made it to hurricanes, with the last 2, Eugene and Fernanda, reaching major hurricane status. So we've had 6 named storms. The average is about 7 to this date, July, and 3 hurricanes. So we're right at just above average with as it relates to the long-term average from 81 to 2010. So shaping up to be an active season in the Pacific. These are the storms that we've had so far. And the actor is Fernanda, and that's the current position at this time. Over in the Atlantic, as I mentioned, Dawn just formed within the last few hours. So the webinar is quite timely. So that makes 4 named storms already. Arlene formed in April, which was a fairly rare event to have a storm form in the month of April. June, we saw Brett and Cindy, and now Dawn as of this evening. So all those made it to tropical storm status. So far this year, the 4 named storms, no hurricanes yet. So you can see how that compares to the average. So we are still running a little bit above average, even in the Atlantic. So above the Atlantic and the Pacific so far. So this map actually, since Dawn is a fairly new storm, I don't have a track for Dawn because it was just declared a tropical storm early this evening or late this afternoon. But Arlene, this is Arlene that formed as a sub back in the spring, and then Brett, and then Cindy, which occurred in the month of June. And as I say, this is, you can see where tropical storm Dawn is. So the rest of the hurricane season, you can see the activity really starts to pick up here in the next few weeks. Once we hit the month of August and into September, we tend to get 3 to 4 named storms over the course of those 2 months, with the peak of the hurricane season being the month of September. In July, so this is our first year with Dawn, and we typically get on average about 1 storm in the month of July, but as I say, you can really see how things start to pick up here in the month of August and hurricane season, which is September. So the factors that are influencing hurricane season this year, certainly the warm waters in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico are key factors in hurricane formation. And the darker red shades basically indicate warmer water. So you can see there's plenty of warm water in the tropics, being in the Gulf of Mexico. How does that compare to average? Well, if we look at the water temperature anomaly map, we can see that over most of the tropical Atlantic, the land area you see on the right side is essentially Africa. So you can see we head over the tropical Atlantic. Water temperatures are about 1 to 1.5 or so degrees Celsius above average. So that's a lot of energy for storms to develop. So we'll be watching this over the course of the next few weeks as we head into August and September. Another factor that determines whether it's season in the Atlantic or not is whether or not we have an El Nino. El Nino tends to, when we have an El Nino year, we tend to have fewer storms. Anything above 0.5 here is, and this is for water temperature in the the Pacific, which determines whether we have a La Nina or a neutral situation. Anything between minus 0.5 and 0.5 is a neutral situation. So that's what we're in now. And the horizontal yellow line is essentially the average of all these models determining water temperature in that part of the Pacific Ocean. So in the spring, just this past spring, it looked like about a 50% chance that we would be in an El Nino situation by the peak of. It no longer looks that way. It looks as though we will maintain our current status and stay in a neutral situation. Now, this is the official forecast. And for the peak of hurricane season, which would be around the ASO, so August, September, October, we're looking at just shy of a 40% chance situation. So as I mentioned earlier, El Nino situations tend to result in fewer hurricanes. So it doesn't look like El Nino is going to be a damper on hurricane Atlantic this year, because it looks like we're going to stay in a neutral situation through at least the peak of hurricane season, if not the entire season. But again, we'll continue to watch this as time goes on here, and this is essentially what I just summarized. So we got very warm water in the tropical, and it doesn't look like El Nino will have an impact on hurricane season. So what can we expect here looking out over the next couple of weeks? Well, if we look at things like we have Dawn, and I showed you the predicted track of Dawn, basically heading in a westerly direction, and at least at this time not expected to be. There's also another area of activity that the Hurricane Center Miami is watching quite closely, and that's showing about a low formation here, at least in the next couple of days, and a slightly higher, but still in the low category over the 5-day period. So there is activity even here in July in both basins, the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. Now, this just kind of outlines some global tropical hazards over the next 2 weeks. So if we look in the east area, red here is essentially what this is picking up on is essentially Fernanda right now. The area of green or the northeastern part of South America is indicating those two areas of disturbed weather, basically tropical storm Dawn, the area that we're watching that may become a tropical cyclone here over the next 5 days or so. Looking out beyond this week into next week, there's still some activity being picked up in the tropical Atlantic off the coast of Africa. Basically some strong thunder shower activity, which could result in some heavy rain. And so that's, as long as there's some kind of color code over the Atlantic Ocean, that means there's some kind of activity there. So things are starting to get, I would say, once we get into August and September, we'll be in a fairly busy or active hurricane season. The forecast for the entire season, as issued by NOAA back in May, the 25th of May, they're calling for 11 to 16 storms total, and that includes the storms that have already formed. And of those 11 to 17 named storms, 5 to make it their hurricane status, and 2 to 4 of those hurricanes would make it to major hurricane status. So you can see how that compares to the average. So the prediction for an active season, and there's basically about an 80% chance that the hurricane season, the activity this season in the Atlantic will be or above normal. So we're pretty confident that things are going to be fairly active this season. So the hurricane names we've in the Atlantic, we've had Arlene again in April, Brett and Cindy in June, Dawn that just formed over the last few hours. So the next storm after Dawn will be Emily, followed by Gert, Harvey, and so on. So those are going to be the names that we're going to be using in the Atlantic this season. So with that, Mike, that concludes my portion of the webinar with the meteorology of where we are so far this hurricane season, and I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thanks for the overview. I would say it's a thorough job, got no questions, so I think they all must have been answered. Okay. Give me a second. I'll put our speaker's notes back up here. Thanks so much. And we will move speaker for tonight. We'll move on to Julio, WD4R at down in Miami at WX4NHC. So Julio, you should be on mute. Turn the controls over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Good evening, everybody. My call sign is WD4R, and I'm the Amateur Radio Assistant Coordinator at the Hurricane Center. And my presentation is basically what happens at the Hurricane Center and how you all listening can help us do a better job at the Hurricane Center with your reports. Meanwhile, in Florida, lucky we haven't had a direct landfall in years, but we can't let our guard down. The Atlantic is heating up, and as Bob just mentioned, Tropical Storm Dawn and we're still 2 months away from the peak of hurricane season, so everybody in the affected area should be getting prepared. So by hiring your best helper to put up your shutters, make sure you're prepared to protect your car, and no matter how much spam or water you save, when the local asks you to evacuate, make sure you carefully follow their local evacuation procedures. Anyway, WX4NHC, who we are and what we, our purpose and goals to collect weather data, surface reports from the hurricane affected areas in real time for use with the hurricane forecasters, provide easy communications to and from the Hurricane Center if we get a direct hit, provide hurricane advisories over ham radio when all sources to the affected area are not available, and also to enhance and promote the accuracy and availability of weather data on surface reports. And our mission is that you help us with that. A little history about the Hurricane Center's amateur radio station. In the early 80s and 90s, we were located on of a 12-story high-rise building. Notice it's the only floor that has hurricane shutters. In 1980, Dr. Neil Frank was interested in setting up a ham radio station to communicate to the Caribbean islands during hurricanes. The first station was very humble beginnings with a Yaesu FT101 100 radio wire antenna and a student who just happened to live across the street on A1A. After a few years, we built a, and that Go Kit weighed over 200 pounds and it never went anywhere. So in 1992, it was our big one. A Category 5 hurricane named Andrew made landfall in South Florida. More than 300,000 homes and businesses were severely damaged or destroyed. Building severely damaged was the one that contained the Hurricane Center, which suffered heavy damage, including loss of all the radars and emergency generators, which were on the roof. So after Hurricane Andrew, somebody at the Hurricane Center said, well, you know what, maybe we should put the Hurricane Center in a hurricane-proof building. So 3 years later, they built a hurricane-proof building, which will withstand a Category 5, and the 2 bathrooms inside will withstand an EF5 tornado. We have 7 feet of coax. We have 7 antennas that will withstand hurricane force winds. Our new equipment was donated by Yaesu. They donated a whole new line the HF radios. Our main station is now an FT1200 with a Yaesu amplifier running about 600 watts. The VHF, those are used mainly for local communications between the Hurricane Center and local agencies, especially if we do get a direct hit. We also use digital modes such as Echolink, WinLink, HF and VHF APRS, and also email and even fax. Equipment and antennas were donated by private companies. The WX4NHC operators are specially trained and have spent thousands of hours away from work, pleasure to volunteer their unique ham radio skills during hurricanes. Since 1980, WX4NHC has been activated for over and 1,000 of on-the-air hours. And because of their generous volunteering, we have been able to help the Hurricane Center people, and a lot of it is because of the help of all you listeners that are able to check into all the various nets and send in your reports. So first, we've been through 9 Hurricane Center directors, and we're waiting for our 10th. Dr. Rignab, which was wonderful. He was very supportive of radio at the Hurricane Center. He even made several presentations during the National Hurricane Conference about his personal experience with ham radio and hurricanes. He has sense for the Weather Channel. So in recognition of his support of amateur radio, we did present him with a very nice plaque. And it includes an authentic J38 Morse code key. And Dr. Nab promised he will get his ham ticket this year. Right now is Dr. Ed Rappaport, and Ed has been with us for more than 30 years and is also very supportive of ham radio. How ham radio operators can help during hurricane season. Well, we have many different nets, but the main one we use is the HurricANet, and also the VoIP Hurricane Net. We have also various ways you can send in reports if you're in a hurricane affected area or if you're relaying from someone in a hurricane. You can contact us many different ways, whether by radio or digital, and this list is on our website. The Hurricane Watch Net has been around since 1965. It's recognized worldwide for HF hurricane communications. This is our net, and you can find us there during any hurricane affecting the Atlantic, Caribbean, Gulf, and Eastern Pacific. Bobby B5 HAV will do a presentation shortly on the Hurricane Watch Net. We're also very active on the VoIP Hurricane Net, Echolink, and ARRL, and several other digital modes. This is very, very important, especially when HF propagation may not be available to an affected area. Many times they can relay reports and it gets back to us. Rob Macedo, KD1CY, will present all the details of the VoIP hurricane. We also have a service called the Citizens Weather Observer Program, CWOP, which we use various methods like APRS, and even non-amateur or weather enthusiasts can send their reports directly onto the NOAA's Mesonet website. We do offer a free program on our website to help put your on that map. Hurricane surface reports, examples and forms that we use at WX4NHC. This is our online form. It can be used by amateurs or non-amateurs. Reports that you create from your weather station or you relay from the hurricane affected area. Here's the printed report we use. Mainly we use this as a checklist to make sure we have the basic data and format in the order that the hurricane forecasters like to look at, so they don't have to relearn every time there's a different report. So you might print this out, it's on our website, and then you can use that as your own checklist when you submit a report. We also use this when we handwrite reports received by HF. just an example of one of the reports we received. This was from the Memorial Hospital during Hurricane Rita in 2005 in Texas. And she was there, this report of their emergency room doors being blown in. And this is important because we don't just do weather. Sometimes we get these kind of damage reports or emergency reports, and across the hall radio room is the FEMA National Liaison to Washington, and they relay some of those reports and they can get additional help. Here's another report that was interesting during tropical storms, a oil platform in the middle of the Gulf where they kept reporting wind gusts close to 100 miles per hour. And after they received all these reports, they reclassified Cindy as. And recently we started experimenting with D-Star. Now we don't have D-Star capabilities live at the Hurricane Center yet, but due to the efforts of John Dave or QDX, he has been able to compose a system where he conducts a net, the severe weather net, and relays the reports using DRADs, which is then printed at the. So can ham radio make a difference? Absolutely. Last year, we had a total of 15 tropical cyclones, 7 before reach major hurricane strength. 2 of them became major hurricanes, which was Matthew and Otto, and I'll just do a little bit on Matthew. Matthew affected millions of people from the Caribbean all the way to the east coast of Florida. And one of the vital communications links we had at was to the Haitian hams, for instance, HH2JR, John Robert, and HH2JH, Father John. It was extremely full to hear what's going on down there during the hurricane. And it's always alarming and sad to hear some of the reports, especially the one of the 2000 to evacuate the southern coast there. And before Hurricane Matthew hit the tiny island just south of Haiti called Île-de-Vache, Father John about the orphanage on the island, and when the hurricane forecasters saw this, they asked us to relay to them the importance of evacuating the coastal orphanage to higher. The storm was predicted to have 14 to 18 foot storm surge, which occurs during a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricane Matthew destroyed many along the southern coast of Haiti and killed over 1,000 people. Here's just another example. I'll go quickly through this one. Hurricane Michelle in 2001, and we were receiving live reports from Cuba, from the Isle of Youth, which actually included live radars from their radar on the island. That was very helpful. And then after it crossed over Cuba, we received reports from a sailboat in Highborn Key, Bahamas, with winds right as the Bahamian authorities were going to drop their hurricane warnings. And Max Mayfield got on the phone with the Met Office in the Bahamas, and they reposted the hurricane warnings. And basically, even though the eye opened up on the south side, it still had the momentum of 100-mile-per-hour winds to a satellite. And of course, Katrina, 2005, the big one that hit the Big Easy. Katrina was one of the deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history since the 19Chobe hurricane. It killed 1,833 people and caused damages over $108 billion, nearly 4 times more than Hurricane Andrew in 1992. So ham radio was vital again during Katrina. Many of the national weathers, like the one in Slidell and Lake Charles, went off the air with their AWIPs and some of the other communications they used, and the only thing left was ham radio. And they had a ham using a wire antenna and a battery, and was able to pass on all the information during the eye landfall with live reports of the wind and barometric pressure at them for 6 hours afterwards to coordinate all of their help to get the people out. Ham radio is recognized officially with King Center in many of their official reports. This is one from Hurricane Ivan 2004, and it reads, amateur radio ham operators throughout the Caribbean region and those working for Hurricane Center's WX4NHC and Hurricane WatchNet team were indispensable in providing critical reports as Ivan moved through the Windward Islands and across the sea. Why we volunteer? Well, we volunteer many hours of skills, and we practice a lot in what we do. And this is why all of you are attending tonight's webinar, because we care to help others in their time of need. So ham radio is still very important, even though it's over 100 years old. So on behalf of C and the National Hurricane Center, we thank you all for your support. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you. And bring the slides back. Okay, thanks so much. And while I've got you there, maybe you can speak a little to this, because it's a question we often get each year with this webinar. Hams that do not live in the zone, participating in WX4NHC, and I'll also I'm sure Bobby and Rob will be able to chime in on this. They can play a role in this, because there really is a value in having folks outside the affected area on an HF net, right?
Oh, absolutely. HF or VoIP. I mean, I can give you two quick examples. One was Hurricane Fabian when it hit Bermuda. We had no propagation from Miami to Bermuda, none at all. Reports from Bermuda were received through relays as far as Canada and New England and the Midwest back to us, back and forth. A lot of that was newspaper, and there's an article about that, how everybody worked as a chain to bring the information back and forth. And the same thing with the VoIP, HF propagation. One of the hurricanes that hit Grenada, I think it was Ivan, we had no HF communications directly. However, a ham from St. Lucia had communications, relayed the reports over the VoIP net, and we printed them out at the Hurricane Center. So absolutely, relays are more than half of the reports we receive.
Okay, great. Thanks, Julio. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, Julio, and we'll get ready to move on. I did have somebody ask about the Julio shared. I sent a link out to everybody. You should have it on where to find those online. Okay, we'll move along over to the media and PR side. Sean, you're up.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the 2007 Hurricane webinar. My name is Sean Kutzko, KX9X. I'm the Media and Public Relations Manager at ARRL headquarters. You've got a lot of speakers here tonight that are talking about the weather aspect of the 2017 hurricane season. I'd like to talk a little bit about how to get the word out about your efforts to use amateur radio to assist during a hurricane event. Now, everybody who has a ham radio license wants to communicate. That's one of the main reasons why we all get a license, and we all want to serve our fellow man and serve the public by providing communications, especially during a disaster like a hurricane. But the reality is important that we have amateurs that are capable of speaking to the media and telling our story. That's why we absolutely need to have public information officers and public coordinators during disaster events such as a hurricane. Amateur radio has a very short window of involvement during a major incident like a hurricane. Sometimes it's 8 to 72 hours. That's a major critical time right after a hurricane hits an affected area. Once the standard communications info stored, speaking strictly from a public relations standpoint and helping to get the story of how amateur radio benefits during these times, once standard communications or chance for public visibility can drop very, very quickly. So it's incredibly important that we get information out to our local and national media who are involved with that communication during the event. Getting information out as the event is occurring is much more effective than getting information out by report. After action reports to the media during a national event such as this magnitude is old news. What we're doing in real event itself is far more interesting and important to the local and national media. A public information officer's responsibilities are very straightforward. You need to be to your local media outlet. That is the job. You need to be proactive. You absolutely have to gather and distribute the information you have about amateur radio's disaster quickly and accurately. Another key component about public information officers' role during a natural disaster such as this is we need to be informed at headquarters, and your field organization needs to be informed as to what your group is doing as a response to a national event such as a hurricane. Of course, you need to be articulate, informed, and you need to be very professional. Dress and appearance equals credibility in situations like this. It's not always going to be possible for you to have a PPE at the nearest opportunity, but anything you can do to keep your appearance in good shape during an event of this nature adds to your credibility when you appear on camera, when you're communicating with a reporter. It adds to your credibility significantly. How PIOs promote amateur radio. The main thing officers need to do in order to have credibility and access to the media during an emergency like this is to establish relationships with your local media before you have them in your back pocket. Establish those relationships before the emergency. You can distribute press kits explaining what amateur radio's role is during the emergency. ARRL has 4 public information officers to do just this task. You also need to be able to provide accurate information on your group's activation to the media in a way. That's the second time I've said that. I'm hammering that point home because it's absolutely critical. Timely and reliable information gives that credibility and helps raise amateur radio during this situation. Document your group activities. So if you've got a cell phone, if you've got an old style camera, whatever you have in order to get photos, video or audio recordings, you write stories and document events as they are occurring is absolutely critical to a public information officer's role during a storm like this. There's a term that's been used for a few years, pack journalism, where a single reporter or a PIO has all of the technology available for them in a backpack that they can capture an event via a video or photographs, be able to document it using a tablet or any kind of word processor, and get that story out to the media on an as needed backpack. Having all that technology available to you as a PIO in your backpack is very critical, and given the state of technology in 2017, it doesn't have to weigh very much either. Engage in social media. Have a Facebook page, have a Twitter account for your group. You need to friend or follow local reporters and government officials and serve agencies, because when you post an update on your social media feeds, all of the interested parties that are following your feed will see that information, and they can begin to rely on you as a source of credible information during the 48 to 72 hours after landfall. Be sure to post all of your status updates and your contact information too. Make sure that you have a way in your social media so that your reporters and your served agency representatives have a way to get in touch with you. That's absolutely critical. The after effects of all of this work during a hurricane of natural disasters such as this, all of the data that is gathered and reported back to ARRL headquarters gives us ammunition at HQ to how amateur radio provides this service to all of our communities and to our nation. We have a report called Science and Skill in Service to Your Community that was published a couple of years ago. That information being used on Capitol Hill right now for legislative actions such as the Amateur Radio Parity Act, which was just introduced in the Senate earlier this week. The ammunition that we have about your activities as a public information officer is extremely important work, and that lends us visibility and credibility on, and I think all of us are in agreement that we need more visibility on Capitol Hill now. You are a critical team member of any local group. Public info are absolutely critical to a response to a natural disaster. If your group does not have a PIO, you need to get one. PIOs are absolutely critical radio in the public eye. We get a big bump in terms of public relations during field day every year, but in terms of serving our communities, the natural disasters, in terms of just audience, but the public information officers during a natural disaster such as a hurricane or tornado, these are the key reasons why amateur radio is known to the public at large, how we provide service during national disasters. And if that is in the public eye, it's going to be in the eyes and the minds of lawmakers at the national level. Your work as a PIO is extremely critical in keeping amateur radio in the minds of the lawmakers. If you have any questions that are available at any time, my phone number is right there on the screen. You can email me, skutzko@arrl.org, and be sure to follow our ARRL Public Relations Twitter feed at _PR. Very short message, but it's a very important one. Help get the word out during natural disasters of how amateur radio serves your country. That's what I have. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And not any questions, but I want you to, if you wouldn't mind, elaborate. And I think we'd all agree one of the things that makes us such a valuable asset during a storm in our on-air communication skills is the credibility that the service has through all of the other stuff that we do on the air, just daily QSOs to big D expeditions to OTA events and everything else. But for a PIO, credibility is key too, and it's really about what they're doing on blue sky days, making sure that they're aware of license classes going on, field day, things like that. Would you mind elaborating on building the credibility on those blue sky days?
Absolutely. My goodness. Anything that your group can do, your club can do to do any kind of outreach in your local community, especially during those blue sky days, is absolutely critical to building credibility and relationships within your community. You know, it's not just being available during catastrophes. Amateur radio has so much to offer your community in terms of teaching electronics, providing all kinds of hands-on resources about today's current technologies, communications aspects, any kind of outreach you can do. Give a demonstration of amateur radio at community service days. Give a demonstration or a talk at your church or your civic center. Just because you have an amateur radio club that is geared towards emergency preparedness and community service during a natural disaster, there's 1,000 different ways that you can promote amateur radio when during non-emergency. So establish those relationships with your community leaders and provide demonstrations of how amateur radio can provide a service and, frankly, entertainment during those blue sky days as well. Every piece of outreach you can do is critical, not just during the natural disasters. All outreach is important.
Great, thank you. And we did get one question coming for you. Can you talk a little bit about training on how to train amateur radio operators PIO?
Any type of public speaking that you can engage in. Numerous community colleges have all kinds of public speaking classes that you can take. Tons of classes that FEMA has to offer online that you can take at your leisure. I know that there are there's a couple of classes on social media, for example. FEMA is an excellent resource. Any kind of training that you can get under your belt during non-emergency situations will give you credibility and experience in dealing with the emergency situation. And in terms of other types of training, those outreach events that I was just talking about a moment ago get you in front of your community leaders. All of the interactions that you have with your local community media, all of that lends itself and gives you experience you need to step up and serve during a natural disaster.
Okay, thank you. And I did send the link out to the FEMA independent study site, so everybody should have that. There's basic PIO, and I think they've got the social media for emergency management there. And we got a little reminder from one of our PICs. Don't forget to keep them in the loop as well, the section level PIO. So
yep,
definitely keep them in the loop.
That's part of the field organization that I mentioned earlier. You got to keep your PIC informed of what's going on.
Yep, it's definitely at times like this, not time to keep everything to yourself. Time to brag about what we do. Okay, thank you, Sean, and we will go ahead and let me get the screens reoriented here. I do want to remind everybody, because I had a few questions. We are recording this, so it will be available later on, probably later this week. And if you are interested in getting a specific slide set, best bet is to contact really up to them if they want to share their slide sets. Their contact information will be made available towards the end of the session here. Okay, we're going to move along. VoIP Weather and Hurricane Net with Rob Macedo. Give me a second, Rob. I'll get you set up. There you go.
All right, good evening to everybody, and happy to see another great turnout for another webinar here. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the VoIP Hurricane, give an overview of Skywarn and its support for tropical systems as well, because we do have hurricanes and the hurricane nets that are active, but even storms and post-tropical systems can result in local and regional activations of Skywarn and supporting your National Weather Service with timely severe weather reports of life and property in those situations. So we're going to talk about both of these things this evening. So I mentioned the VoIP Hurricane Net mission. Is to provide near real-time measured weather data and damage reports to WX4NHC, the amateur radio station at the National Hurricane Center. We use the Skywarn reporting criteria. Those that are trained to Skywarn, those that want to look up what the reporting criteria is, we have it on our website, voipwx.net. We also have a presence on Facebook and Twitter under the UXNet as well. We try to provide interoperability for EOCs, non-governmental organizations such as the Red Cross, Salvation Army, local National Weather Service forecast off the Hurricane Center, or possibly the regional weather service offices, liaison to other nets that may be on Echolink and IRLP, but they want to stay local. We can send folks to those nets and bring it back to WX4NHC. And we're on the Echolink Star WX Talk Conference, node 7203, IRLP Reflector 92. We also put out the advisory information and updates as needed for stations in the affected area. We activate anytime there is a path for information in the hurricane. That can be over Echolink and IRLP. We have really tried to branch out. We will look at anything on the web that looks like reasonable data. There's no weather station information that's up on the Davis WeatherLink site, on Weather Underground. This could be information off of Facebook and Twitter for social media that we can verify and vet to the best. It can be through the stormcarib.com site, which is a storm blogging site focused on the Caribbean. Any way we can get information to the Hurricane Center to give them a picture in words of what's going on, or in some cases photos and even videos, particularly over social media, that's very helpful to the Hurricane Center forecasters. In addition, if things go down, or if enough resources go down, but internet is still available in some of the affected areas. We sometimes will self-activate our net. Suddenly ramps up to a hurricane unexpectedly, or if there's a need, an organization asks us to activate our net, we will activate as needed. And the Weather Talk 219 system is always on and operational, and as is our backup systems as well. We have a Hurricane Net management team that watches over the tropics in the Atlantic. We monitor the tropical weather outlooks, the special tropical disturbance statements, and all the advisories and discussions on tropical systems. As they get close to land, if they reach or near hurricane strength, we'll reach out to WX4NHC and determine our activation status. We've done a couple of self-activations. Hurricane Emily was a very good example. In 2000, it looked like it was going to strengthen into a hurricane, and it didn't. It kind of stayed as a tropical storm, and then it suddenly intensified and unexpectedly into a hurricane after it looked like it was going to continue as a tropical storm through the Caribbean islands. And that was a case of some very valuable information passed as it went portions of the Caribbean around the island of Grenada. Hurricanes Humberto and Lorenzo were other examples. Hurricane Thomas in 2010, very similar situations. Controls and net management, we use the Telegram application to coordinate amongst ourselves in terms of net control schedules and information and what along. And we try to prepare all of our participants in the VoIP Hurricane Net for what a hurricane season can bring across the coastal areas. We have a Hurricane Prep Net that is on the Saturday evening in much of North America. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, which is actually 0000 hours UTC. We are weekly during the hurricane season months. We scale it down to monthly in the non-hurricane season months of December through May. It's a great forum to learn about our net, ask technical questions. We provide a quick to get people thinking about preparation and different items involving hurricanes and severe weather. Nets for actual activations can be quite a bit different trying to do in those areas. And again, we have our website, voipwx.net. We also have a presence on Facebook and Twitter under VoIPWXNet. WX4NHC communications test, that was completed on May 27th. There was a good article on that. You can see a summary of what occurred there. We're also going to be focused, again, on routing amateur radio operators and any other means to get information during hurricanes across the U.S. coastline, but also internationally in the Caribbean, Mexico, can provide information into the Hurricane Center, looking, as I mentioned, to the various weather stations that are online and the storm blogging groups. One of the things I wanted to emphasize, we are really interested in looking for some experienced net controls for our weekly prep net that, as I mentioned, goes monthly in the non-hurricane season months, and for actual net. Our hurricane prep net runs like many of the nets on VHF, UHF, and HF. We usually have a primary and a secondary net control because we can also accept text box check-ins. Having both Echolink and IRLP access to our net is desirable but not required, and in some ways Echolink is a bit more beneficial because you can see the text box check-ins and control over the system if necessary to control things that are happening on the network. We again use the Telegram app for NCO chat, and we utilize many of the net for the prep net in actual activations, and we're going to try to do a net control training around mid-August. It'll be on net activations, a focus there, but can also cover the prep net. Prep net runs a lot like a regular net does. There are a little bit of nuances with the Echolink and the text box check-in concept. This is a bunch of the contact information management team. This is also on our VoIPWX net website. In terms of, do you have an IRLP node in your area that supports the net, or an Echolink node, or an Echolink? You can check out some of the websites that are listed here for some of that information, and that'll tell you if you have a local node in your area. Certainly on Echolink, you can also via the PC program or the cell phone app. And again, I mentioned our website and our social media presence. One thing I didn't mention is our VoIPWXNet email list, and you see the link there for that. And we can assist, our net management team can assist with any node problems or setup of new nodes with Echolink and IRLP technology. So a little bit into kind of the best practices in Skywarn for tropical and post-tropical systems. And these are just some of the photo credits for this section of the presentation. And we photo from the HurrAVAC Hurricane Tracking Program. We have hurricanes. We have this, the national hurricane nets like the Hurricane Watch Net, our VoIP Hurricane Net, the X4 NHC. But we also have tropical systems that they either can transform into a post-tropical system or even weaker tropical systems that can still a number of weather hazards that can, and information from a Skywarn activation perspective that local National Weather Service offices are really interested in. And even though this may not be active, there's still valuable information and valuable contributions that amateur radio operators can make to provide information to the National Weather Service for severe weather. Can be very helpful to local and state emergency management and non-governmental organizations that may still have to have a level of response for these systems even though they're no longer hurricanes. Storms, depending on their size and intensity, can be equivalent to Category 1 hurricanes, and sometimes tropical systems and just their interaction with other weather systems can cause significant issues. Said the transitioning of systems, especially as you get up into the Northeast United States, those transitioning systems can sometimes pose a big threat or as big of a threat as a trop. One case that occurred in South Central Louisiana, there was a significant flood disaster in the middle of August. It was a decaying convective system with a slow-moving tropical that was not classified in any way, but there was tremendous rainfall. And the Crescent City Amateur Radio Group, along with a number of other groups in Louisiana, activated their Skywarn nets. They went through that and supported post-flood efforts for Red Cross, for shelter communications and things of that nature. This system was not named. It was not a tropical system or class. There were roles for amateur radio operators to play here, both in reporting severe weather conditions and flash flooding conditions for the National Weather Service and other agencies for situational awareness as post-flooding support piece for shelter communications. And while the rules in how systems are classified are different now than they were in 2012, Hurricane Sandy landfall is a post-tropical system. But we all know what Hurricane Sandy did in terms of damage along the New Jersey and New York City coast and even up in southern New England, where I'm from. We had hurricane-force wind gusts along parts of the south coast and quite a few power outages from trees and power lines and storm surge flooding along the coast of Rhode Island. That was the worst since Hurricane Bob in 19. And again, the main impacts across New York City, New Jersey, and parts of the Delmarva. This was definitely a major response for amateur radio. And in this case, the Hurricane Watch Net was active despite its post-tropical status. But it's to give everybody here an idea that even though hurricanes are a big focus, tropical systems can produce local and regional responses that are needed. And sometimes even the hurricane nets and the presence at the Hurricane Center can be invoked for systems that just are very true, even though they may not fit the classic hurricane definition. So if you're a Skywarn coordinator and an ARRL coordinator, you want to have your emergency preparations in place. But even though it may not be a true communications emergency where normal communication means have gone down, there are many ways we can contribute. Again, that situational awareness and disaster, providing information, weather reports, very important, could be post-shelter communications afterwards. Being that force multiplier and providing what's happening out there based on the Weather Service sets has been a very valuable set of information for agencies that can be very helpful. And then if communications do go down and we're in to be able to provide that information to agencies, it's just kind of a seamless transition when those communications fail. So kind of in conclusion, from a hurricane perspective versus tropical storms and weaker tropical systems or post-tropical systems, the only main difference that we're looking for folks is bubble up that information from the local nets for distribution to the Hurricane Center and other agencies. But we really rely on that local information and being able to have that information seamlessly move up to the hurricane nets and into the Hurricane Center amateur radio station. When the systems are of weaker intensity, you still want to be active. There are still service offices that want the criteria information that amateur radio operators can provide. Other agencies can benefit on this information for situational awareness and disaster intelligence. And some of the other things that we do, monitoring social media for information, embedding that information, monitoring weather stations and information that we can get online, and funneling that information through the original form of social media. So as a source of our own social media through our own nets and being able to monitor the other information and vet what's out there really becomes a powerful tool for emergency managers and non-governmental organizations to provide critical data to them for them to make decisions during various weather situations, from hurricanes, storms, and post-tropical systems that may post-tropical systems that can morph from hurricanes as they move up the coast. This last slide is just links to the various nets, the Hurricane Center information, and other tropical weather site resources of interest, so folks can check that out at their leisure. And that brings us to the end. So Mike, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And get the slides up here. Okay, Rob, got one question that came in. Do volunteers monitor the conference server during downtimes?
So we have from our net group that try to monitor the system during downtimes. It is not monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A few of us do try to monitor the system at times during the day or in specific significant severe weather situations. Sometimes folks will let you there just in case there is weather information that goes in there. Certainly prior to and during more significant tropical systems, there is a presence there, and there has been some talk of trying to maintain a watch there on a more regular basis, but we would have to have the resources, the amateur there, to be able to provide that service on a more regular and routine basis.
Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. All right, covers the questions we had for Rob, so we will move right along and shift gears over to Bobby Graves, KB5HAV from Hurricane Watch. Bobby, it's all yours.
Well, good evening, Mike, and my thanks to the ARRL for hosting this 2017 hurricane season webinar, and also everyone that's joined us tonight. I'm Bobby Graves, amateur radio call sign, KB5HAV, and I'm also the net manager for the Hurricane Watch Net. 2017, the third straight season watching and activating for any landfalling hurricane, and namely to help those in any affected hurricane area. If I can get my, there we go. The Hurricane Watch Net was established back in Labor Day weekend of 1965 by Jerry Murphy, K-A-Y-U-W, who is a resident of the Cleveland. Not long afterwards, gained a formal direct working relationship with the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Back in 2014, we gained a formal direct working relationship with the Canadian Hurricanes. And within a couple of months later, we were working together with Hurricane Arthur that hit the Outer Banks of North Carolina and then moved on up towards Nova Scotia. And we've been active for Atlantic Basin hurricanes since 1965, including a number of tropical storms. Primarily, they were forecast to become a hurricane prior to landfall at the request of the forecasters at the National Hurricane Center. And we've also worked a few storms affecting folks in the Eastern Pacific. Our mission is to disseminate advisory information. We do so primarily for the marine interest, Caribbean island and Central American nations, and other interests that depend on media is not really available. Also to obtain real-time ground level weather conditions and initial damage assessments. And to communications link for the National Hurricane Center in Miami, as well as any national forecast office throughout the coastal states, Canadian Hurricane Center, any operation centers and emergency management agencies, including non-governmental organizations and other vital interests. They can also involve military relief operations and the protection of life, property, and after any hurricane event. Our activation policy has generally been whenever a hurricane is within 300 statute miles of expected landfall. Now, due to we may activate just a little bit outside of that range. If it's maybe moving a little bit slow, kind of like the way Matthew did last year, where it basically all but stalled for a good while within our 300-mile criteria, we postponed that for a little while until it actually started moving again. For many years, we operated primarily on 14.325. Now we operate around the clock. Reason being, as you know, hurricanes, they don't have a sense of time. If they get ready, it doesn't matter if it's midnight or noon in the afternoon, whatever. So we have to be prepared. So a few years ago, we started operating around the clock. So our nighttime operations will be on 7 point search, and of course by day 14.325. And now we're at the bottom end of the solar cycle, and we may actually be operating both frequencies simultaneously. Now, some may ask why frequencies without a plus or minus. We do so for this. A lot of mariners have their radios do not have a VFO amateur radio rig does. Those radios are channelized, and a lot coming straight from the factory. These two frequencies are already programmed into the radio where to come to, and there's also a lot of folks out the Caribbean listening via shortwave radio. They know where to come and find us on these frequencies. And our coverage area does need to be in Central America, Eastern Mexico, Eastern Canada, and all the coastal United States. From time to time, we do get a chance to talk to the hurricane hunters. They'll join us. That includes hurricane hunters out of from the United States Air Force, out of Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, as well as the NOAA Hurricane, which is now stationed out of Lakeland, Florida, and they are going through a process of revamping all their aircraft with a lot of new technology, radar equipment, electric, as well as brand new paint schemes. Who are we and where are we? Well, we're approximately 40 operators that have been well trained. Some are seasoned operators, and we're scattered across 16 states, 9 countries. We also have 8 operators that are fully bilingual, and we have 6 operators who obtained honorary status for the fact they've been with us for at least 20 years. 2 members have been with us for over 30 years. That's Terry Redding and MJ out of DeLand, Florida, and Tony Cease, VP9HK in Bermuda. And we're constantly looking for additional operators, especially help us in the western states. They can help us on long-haul propagation on 20 meters. And since we're also operating 24 hours, I need additional help on the 40-meter band as well. Last year was our first really busy year in a number of years. We activated for 5 total storms, and as you can see in the middle of the screen for Matthew, we were operational and operations for almost a solid week, 6.5 straight days, working around the clock. I'll hit more on these in just a moment. The year though was Hurricane ARRL. They hit just a little north of Belize City, Belize, and on the right-hand part of the screen, there's a satellite image that has some interesting details, and that's some supercell thunderstorms that are embedded in the feeder bands of that storm. So not only do you get the high winds in these storms, but also you can get some spin up 20 feeder bands as they move in. So those are things you need to watch out for. Our second storm of the year was Hurricane Hermine that hit the Big Bend of Florida. Now, control operators, we were really wondering, was this actually, in fact, a hurricane? Because a lot of the reports we were getting was calm wind, light rain, but where the storm actually made landfall was in a sparsely populated area, more like forest is what it was. But where it actually came in, it was indeed a Category 1 hurricane. It was a very interesting storm there. Then the storm of the season, Hurricane Matthew. Now, the dots that you see are where the position of the storm was every 3 hours. Generally, forecasts come out every 6 hours, but when the storm is or is within a close proximity to land, you get an intermediate advisory in between. So these dots, each one represent 3-hour intervals. And the red dot is where it was actually a hurricane. And I've been tracking these things for many, many years, and I don't recall in a long time a storm that is tracked as far as Matthew did at us. Matthew was also the first Category 5 hurricane to develop in the Atlantic Basin since Felix back in 2007 that hit Nicaragua that year. This is a time-lapse loop, I'm hoping it's come through on your end, of Matthew when it's at its strongest as a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 100 miles per hour. And it basically just came to a halt and stalled. It was leaving us wondering, where is this thing going to go? Some of the forecasts had it coming Haiti. Some had it moving toward the west, hitting Jamaica. Some coming right on up through the middle and hitting Cuba. No matter what, the bulk of the rain was on the west and the east side of the storm, which meant Haiti and the Dominican Republic was going to get quite a bit of rain. And of course, the storm did move in, hit the western part of Haiti with Category 4 winds at 145 miles per hour, and I think it was about 27 inches of rain that dumped up in the mountain areas. All total, there was right at 500 that perished in Haiti alone just from this one storm. This is a little town called Corral, which is on the north side of the peninsula of Haiti, just west of Port-au-Prince. You got a before and after shot there, and you see all the flooding that took place there. Go a little bit further east in the town of Jeremy, they really got hit. And a lot of the houses throughout Haiti, they're cinder block houses with tin roofs. Some may be wood, but just the wind and the flash flooding just really wreaked havoc there. I've got a friend of ours with Julio and me, Jean Robert, HH2JR. Before the storm, I sent him an email to let him know what was going on and to let him know we were getting ready to activate and to help us spread the word throughout the country. Instead of replying by email, I actually picked up the phone distance. He said, "Bobby, thanks for loving on us. This is the first we've even heard of Matthew coming." They said the national media here in Haiti hasn't told us anything. He said he's going to help spread the word, and I mean, it just really hurt the entire country there. You go back to 2010 when they had the big earthquake. Cholera got introduced into Haiti. Well, all these mudslides and the heavy rainfall has spread cholera across the entire country, and they are hurting. They're hurting bad. So please, if you can help these people, and even just thoughts and prayers, please send your way and help them out there. Matthew, as it started moving a little bit further toward the United States, was causing even one time it looked like the forecast trade was going to carry straight on up the entire eastern seaboard on up into Nova Scotia. And thank goodness it did not do that. It stayed offshore, and one time it even looked like it was going to loop around, come back and hit Miami, maybe even go in the Gulf of Mexico. But we had something that really helped us out a bit, and that was Hurricane Nicole. She was getting started up real east side of Matthew and started pulling a lot of moisture out and really helping Matthew weaken, and that was sort of our saving grace there. But then we had to deal with Nicole. Nicole went on up and hit the island of Bermuda, not directly, but it was still indirect. This made Bermuda gave in a row of being affected by a major hurricane. 2014, they got hit dead on with Hurricane Gonzalo. The next year, they got hit by Joaquin, and then 2016 got. And then the storm that really just threw us off or caught us off guard was Hurricane Otto. Hit on Thanksgiving Day last year. And it would either go into Costa Rica or either Nicaragua. It was sort of toying with us. Not really sure where it was going to go, but it went on and hit Nicaragua. All right. On the west side of Nicaragua, they had an earthquake. And if there was any time that an area could be prepared, people on there to assist with any type of emergency communications, whether it be an earthquake or hurricane or both, we had quite a few folks on the air prepared ready. Recently, The only station we heard from that day was the station in Panama. So we were scratching our heads. Where is everybody? So we're working hard to find ways to get more people involved during these hurricane events. Ask from time to time, if I'm inland, am I really at risk of being a hurricane or even a tropical storm? And the answer is yes. And you can come way inland. This is a track of Hurricane Hugo that hit back in 1980. It hit Charleston, South Carolina as a Category 4 hurricane, moved well inland. As it crossed over into North Carolina, going to the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was a hurricane. And before it weakened down a tropical storm, crossed over in Virginia, West Virginia, Eastern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, before it weakened into an extratropical cyclone of the Great Lakes and going up into Canada. So yes, you can be affected by these storms well inland. So don't drop your guard and think, well, it hit the coastal area. Not really. So how do I prepare for a tropical cyclone? Well, one, stay informed. If you're especially in the coastal regions with national media, social media, our website, hwn.org, also have on hand a emergency plan. Keep on hand a emergency supply kit. And if you ever get to evacuate, don't wait. One thing we'd like to recommend people is to keep an eye on our website, hwn.org. If you'll find it right there in the middle of the screen, active storm and for which basin. And of course, right now we're tracking 3 different storms. We got Tropical Storm Don formed a few hours ago. Got Hurricane Fernanda, as well as Tropical Depression 7 Echo out there in the Eastern Pacific. Also, in the a little bit lower, you can download a copy of a emergency plan as well as a kit. Also, you can subscribe to receive via email the latest advisories and tropical weather outlook. It's our 18th season of providing this free service, and I'd like you to check that out. And also, we have our presence on social media via Facebook, and we're also getting started up with a YouTube channel. Anytime there is a active storm basin, whether it be the Atlantic, Eastern Pacific, or Central Pacific, it'll be highlighted. And of course, below the name, you'll find all the various data that's available. Of course, at the very bottom of the page, there's even a satellite imagery. You can keep up what's going on with that particular system. Also, by ham radio, you can keep up with what's going on. We products on the networks of 14300. That includes the Interconnet as well as the Maritime Mobile Service Network. Everyone definitely needs to have an emergency plan. In case the time comes you have to evacuate, you don't have to worry about what do I need, such as cash. I can guarantee you if you're running low on cash, you think, well, I'm going to run to the ATM real quick and get some money, you can just about count them babies being empty. So I already have you some cash on hand as an emergency standby, along with copies of various insurance policies goes on. Same with emergency basic supply kits, such as food, water, flashlights, batteries. I may see that you may think, well, you know, I got maps here on my cell phone. Well, if a major hurricane like a Cat 4 or even Category 5 hurricane hits your area, like that of a EF5 tornado wiping through a community, except it's more widespread. Now, over the years, phone companies have been trying to reinforce their cell tower. They really haven't been tested in the real world stuff yet. So if you're without cell phone usage in your local area after one of these big storms, you may not have internet phone, much less regular cell coverage. So your maps are useless on your cell phone. So having an actual paper map can help you get around in your neighborhood, because all your buildings around as far as your references to let you know where you're at, they may be gone. So you need a way to know where to get around that. Just know where your evacuation routes are, because when the time comes, everybody's going to be doing like you are, trying to get out of town. And people get too big of a rush, get impatient. And some of the reason wrecks happen is 18-wheelers, if they come to a stop and they start trying to take off, they cannot take off as fast as you can in your car. and people get a hole or a gap in front of them, and people think, well, hey, I can jump over there and gain some speed. Well, what happened is when you did that, you created a hole in the lane you're at, and people are going to start trying that you were just in. And then all of a sudden, everybody's fighting to get in all these spots, and then to create a wreck instead of everybody just being patient, working together, moving along. So just be patient, because everybody's like you. They're trying to get out of town and do so safely. When we get ready to activate, we alert the daily users of 1432 We always like to thank everyone who uses these frequencies on a daily basis for having us to have a clear frequency to help those that are in need. We alert the international. They have the means of reaching well over 2,000 mariners in the Atlantic Basin alone, whether they're ham operators, commercial boaters, or what have you. Of course, frequency. If they're non-licensed hams, they can at least listen in. If they are in emergency, yes, we can talk to them. We also alert the ARRL. They have been a great supporter of the Hurricane Net, and I notice this out to people in a timely fashion. We also alert the SATERN Net. We'd like to keep them abreast with what the storm is doing, so that they know what's going on to help with health and welfare traffic, as well as many additional outlets. So when we do activate, what do we need? One, we need your name and your location. If you happen to know your latitude and longitude, let us know that as well. You see, some locations may not be indicated on the map, so if we have that let long, not only helps us out, but it helps the forecasters out as well. We'd like to know whether your data will be measured or estimated. We always prefer measured, but we will take estimated. Let us know what wind gust and wind direction is. If you are using measured equipment, let us know the height and location of your anemometer. If you don't know how to have a measuring equipment and don't know how to well, back on our website, hwn.org, on the left side navigation bar, we have a link that's called Beaufort Wind Scale. Now, this Beaufort Wind Scale gives you information of how to by various indicators. So I invite you to check that out. And of course, rainfall, how much over X amount of time. Storm surge, the Hurricane Center will be post storm surge advisories out this year. So if you can give us information on what's going on, that will help not only help us out, but it will definitely help the forecasters get them accurate reading of what's going on with their forecast. And of course, any damage. As mentioned, this year the forecast has been being bumped up quite just about monthly. What's going to actually happen? There's already been 4 named storms this year. A total of 15 have been forecast by Dr. Glocksback. He's predicting 8 of them to become hurricanes, become major hurricanes, as a Category 3 or higher. How bad can it get? Well, it doesn't get any worse than 2005, where we had 27 named storms, 1 unnamed storm. And of course, don't let you guard down, because these storms can change track. Hurricane Betsy did just that twice back in '65. Hurricane Elena changed course in 1985, came across Cuba, looked like it was heading towards the Alabama-Mississippi state line. It made a right hook, looked like it's going to go somewhere a little bit north of Tampa. Then it did a 180-degree turn, came back and hit as a Category 3 hurricane. So the bottom line is, since 2005, we've had a lot of new people that's moved into coastal regions that have never experienced, even those that moved into Florida and parts of Georgia and South Carolina last year. Yeah, we had a major hurricane, but it was offshore. It caused some damage on shore, but not as bad. And yes, we're overdue for a major hurricane. The last one we had was Wilma back in '05. And of course, don't drop your guard. Hurricane preparedness is about saving we're all here for tonight, and we thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. And I'd say a thorough job. We got no questions. So thank you for the presentation. And I think you mentioned Hugo is going fairly far inland into areas normally not affected the same way. It maintains strength all the way to the Ohio River Valley. So even though you're not coast, and as my friends in Oklahoma say, you live in a place that's 1 million years tidal wave free, you could still be impacted by the effects of tropical storms. Fabian, we're going to move right along. I'll just change us right on over to Bill Feist from SATERN, and we'll carry on with Bill. Bill, present is all yours.
Oh, there we go. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Feist, 8BZH. I'm the National SATERN Liaison for the Salvation Army. SATERN is a Salvation Army team emergency radio network. SATERN, a group of emergency disaster services volunteers who are licensed amateur radio operators. They support the Salvation Army ministry, the Salvation Army with auxiliary communications and technical support, especially during emergencies and disasters. SATERN is not a separate program. It is the Salvation Army's disaster services ministry. There are about 4,000 registered SATERN volunteers in the continental United States. Not all are deployable. Some are deployable, while others prefer to work from home for a variety of reasons. We also have about 180 registered SATERN operators in other countries around the world. That number is gradually growing, and we have a very specific interest in seeing that number grow in Central America. SATERN conducts two different international high-frequency nets. One is the international SATERN single sideband Monday through Saturday at 10 o'clock Central Time on 14.265 megahertz. The other net is the international SATERN, which meets at noon Central Time on Saturdays on 14.065 megahertz. And we use Olivia 8500 with a 1000 hertz off. And I'll discuss these nets in a little bit in more detail. There are also a number of territorial nets. Territorial net for each of the 5 territories in North America. There's also one in Australia, believe it or not. There are also some divisional nets on numerous local SATERN nets on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. The primary missions of all of our nets are to provide regular operator practicing net skills, to provide standard frequencies for handling emergency, priority, and health and welfare messages during disasters, provide a ministry of fellowship for like-minded amateur radio operators interested in supporting the Salvation Army. Providing ministry in all of its different forms is what the Salvation Army is. So that's a very important part of what we do. The International Single Sideband Net, as I mentioned earlier, meets daily except Sundays, and we'll activate on a longer period of time. We only meet for about an hour or so from 10 to 11 o'clock Central Time each day. But if there is a hurricane or a tropical system that is threatening landfall within 12 to 24 hours, we may increase that time that we're activation based on a number of things, including the current or expected conditions, the expected scope of the damage, and also in coordination with our partners, and we'll look at the needs of the Salvation Army. We may also, we'll also generally post activation level on our website, which is SATERN.org, as well as the National Emergency Disaster website, and by email to our partners. The digital net, I said, meets on Saturdays at noon Central Time, and its activation protocols are very to what the single sideband net is. The activation levels for the two nets may be different, though. The digital net may or may not be activated while sideband net is. Activation or coordination with our partners may include SATERN operators listening to or assisting our partners on their nets into or sometimes in lieu of the activation of one of our nets. The primary goal would be to assist those nets with handling any health and welfare messages coming out of the impacted area. Territorial, divisional, and local SATERN nets will be activated based upon the needs of the current situation. There are a number of primary services that we have within SATERN. The first, of course, is our health and welfare messages that we work on. We certainly will handle outbound health and welfare messages, that is, messages that are coming out of the disaster area. We have in the past messages, which are messages going into an impacted area, but we're not accepting those right now. Messages, we're working on developing some calls and guidelines for handling inbound messages, and all of that still needs to be approved by higher headquarters. So when that happens, then we'll start to do inbound messages again. Something new that we're working on, along with the American Radio Relay League, is working with the American Red Cross on their Safe and Well program. It allows speakers and elsewhere to register their name and condition on a website. Family members can then search that website for that person's name and learn whether the survivor is. The Salvation Army and the ARRL have been working with the Red Cross to develop a method of putting that information into a spreadsheet that can be transmitted by WinLink to national headquarters, and they in turn can then download that information into their Safe and Well database. Another primary service that we offer internal within the Salvation Army is to support our Salvation Army disaster operations with tactical communications. We'll also support the Army with technical support. You know, amateur radio operators have many talents besides communications, and SATERN operators provide that technical help to the Salvation Army as well as communications. You know, Bob Dylan once wrote in one of his songs, "The times they are a-changing," and that is so true for a century. This can be seen very clearly just by looking at the technological changes in our society over the last 20 or 30 years. You know, SATERN's been, it'll be 30 years in 2018. So we've been in operation almost 30 years now. Think of the differences in cell phones since that time. HF rig. Think of all the differences that there have been in the last 30 years with HF rigs. And then VHF and UHF. How many of you remember the old AT, you know, the brick with the thumb wheel frequency on top? I remember having one of those. How much different is that from what we have today? And then internet. I mean, the internet didn't even exist 30 years ago. So things have truly changed over the last 30 years. The ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu once wrote in The Art of War, "Victorious warriors win first and then go to war. Defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win." With all the changes that are occurring in the communications and amateur radio world today, SATERN has readied to develop a strategic plan to help to adapt to those changes and remain relevant in the 21st century. A major part of the strategic plan process was to do a SWOT analysis of SATERN's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Analysis led to the development of our vision statement, which you can see here on the screen. It also led to the development of 3 mission impact priorities. First of all, diversification of services. Secondly, to increase awareness of SATERN both within the Salvation Army, amateur radio world, and the larger world in general. And finally, last but certainly not least, to develop a leadership cadre. All of us, we're not getting any younger, and that at some point, each of us are going to have to step down out of our leadership positions, and younger members are going to have to replace us. And that we have to start developing those leaders today, so that when it comes time for us to step down, those leaders have been trained, and are ready to step into those leadership positions. And finally, last but not least, as we were discussing this strategic plan, we realized that there are a lot of strategic plans written, right, a number of them, and almost every one of them, I've seen lots of time and effort and money put into writing the plan. It gets put in this nice little notebook, stuck on, and never thought of or talked about again. The National SATERN Committee was absolutely committed to not allowing that to happen with this plan. So we developed a set of implementing action steps in order to implement each of these mission impact priorities so that the plan itself becomes implemented over a series of years. So what does this all mean for our partners, the ARRL and Hurricane Watch Net, Mars, and FEMA, Homeland Security, and all of our other partners out there? First of all, most of the basic services that SATERN has provided since its founding almost 30 years ago are not expected to change significantly. We're still going to do our daily HA, still going to do health and welfare. We're going to still do the territorial nets, the local nets, and so on. But over time, there's likely going to be new services that are from a growing emergency communications toolbox. We don't want to take tools out of our communications toolbox, but we do want to add tools to the communications tool. And secondly, we want to continue to promote our partnerships and opportunities for coordination with all involved in such a way that that is beneficial for everyone. So with that, I do want to thank the ARRL for conducting this annual webinar and for giving us a chance to speak at it this year. We've appreciated that. My contact information is on the slide there. Please feel free to contact me at any time that you have with questions. And with that, Mike, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Bill, and definitely hitting on some key points. Well, we focused pretty heavily on hurricane response operations. I'm familiar with the work Bill and the rest of SATERN have done on their strategic planning. That's a key part. You know, we can only do this as long as we are training folks to continue to support our partners, such as the Hurricane Center and National Weather Service. So definitely a very important. Okay, I'm going to move into my part of the presentation now, and we'll talk a little bit about what happens at headquarters during hurricane response. I know Bobby and Bill, Rob, Julio have all commented that we're in contact with one another when a hurricane is in the United States or making landfall, and it also includes our international partners. Yeah, that's one thing we all know about hurricanes is they really don't have any concept of political borders. You know, it is definitely a scenario that we kind of have to come together, supporting our fellow amateurs and the path of the storm. There are three folks at headquarters. I want to just kind of mention who we are. This is the support team for everyone out in the field, the emergency preparedness and communications work. Myself, the emergency preparedness manager, KI1U. Ken Bailey, he's our emergency preparedness, primarily is focusing his energy right now on updates to our EC001 course. That's his main focus right now. Some background in public safety and education before joining headquarters staff. And anybody that's worked in a field organization for any length of time knows Steve Ewald, WV1X, support staff supervisor. So this is your team at headquarters on a day-to-day basis. What to expect? First, monitoring phase. That's the first thing we go into when a hurricane is going to be making landfall or impacting an area. We start reaching out to all of partners, Net, WX4NHC, VoIP WebNet, and SATERN, and many others. Not only the amateur radio partners, but some of our non-amateur radio partners, such as National VoIP, Red Cross, and so on. So we start by paying attention, and we're paying attention to what you're telling us. That's an important part of that. You have to let us know what's going on, so we're getting the latest. Lots of conference calls happen when we're facing a hurricane. We get our section folks on, our section managers, section members, public information coordinators, and served agency representatives onto a call. Many of these calls, a lot of them are coordinated actually through National VoIP, but we'll invite all sorts of as well. Very quick situation reports, one from each section. If we're doing it, if National VoIP's doing it, it's one from each partner. So there's a lot of organizations. Quick situation reports. What's happening? What do you have ready to go? What needs are you facing? That's what we're really looking at initially. As we get information from our national partners, we get that information out to the sections impacted by the storm. One thing that we typically do, especially as the storm is, there's a high level of certainty that it's the United States, is we'll start sending out daily email briefs to section staff. These are usually going out from headquarters to section managers, just latest info, reminders on things that we need to know about, and just kind of key information that they can share with their staff. One of the things that we always look at is there's something that is needed out in the field. During Hurricane Katrina, a lot of amateur radio equipment was needed for the response efforts, and the manufacturer stepped up and donated a lot of stuff. This equipment is still available for deployment as needed. It's called the Ham-Aid program. I'll get into a little bit more about that in a moment. For information, that's one thing we can't get enough of, and everybody has said this, we need reports. We need to know what the, especially from the field organization, what is needed to response efforts. And from the section emergency coordinators, and their section emergency coordinators have a monthly report that they turn into headquarters. Gives us a good kind of a basic snapshot of the response after the fact. So the month of so let's say the reports for June usually start showing up at headquarters second week of July. This gives us an idea as to quantify what the amateur radio community is doing on a month-to-month basis, and we particularly pay close attention to major national event, hurricane. Unfortunately, the last large hurricane, Matthew, we really didn't receive any reports, and it made it very difficult to assess what we're doing out in the field in support of hurricane response. The availability of headquarters staff, and staff is not a deployable resource from headquarters. As I mentioned, there's 3 of us on a day-to-day basis. We don't really provide a deployment budget for staff. We can activate W. One of the purposes of having W1AW is for an emergency station to assist with relays. We put them on the air during Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Irene, Matthew, and during Katrina. So that is another resource. We have a headquarters emergency response team. This is one thing to keep in mind. 225 Main Street in Newington operates normal business hours, Monday through Friday, about 8 to 5. So as Bobby pointed out, hurricanes really have timing, and sometimes they show up on weekends or after hours. We have a small team of key staff that we can activate to support the field organization if needed. The activation happens at headquarters, and it's based on information received from the field. So it's not a team that can be requested to activate. It's information there at headquarters based on availability and the needs from the field. Some of the support that this team provides to the field organization, PR and media support, as Sean mentioned, coordination. We may organize conference calls, but if a section or a group of sections being affected by a storm needs to get on a conference call, we can put that together. Regulatory guidance. One thing we often hear is it's an emergency and anything goes. It is not the case. The regulations still apply, and the litmus test for that anything goes is really high. So we also want to make sure that everybody is staying within the boundaries apart in this. Handmade requests. I mentioned handmade. This is a cache of equipment. Most of it is at, or I think maybe just a little or half of it. We've also pre-deployed handmade supplies in Texas, as well as Washington State and Oklahoma. These are available for rapid to an area where additional equipment is needed. They are not permanent deployments. They do have a time frame, and then they are returned once the deployment is over. And of course, this is another resource that we can put on the air. We can connect with the various nets. We can connect with national partners. W1AW also has shares and Mars licenses, so partners as well. Situational awareness. This is a key thing for headquarters. We do rely on those out in the field experiencing what is happening for situational awareness. We gather information directly from the field organization. We will email, cold call, whatever we need to do the folks in the affected area, so what's going on, what they need. It comes from national partners. I mentioned National VOAD, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disasters. That's an association of about 65 organizations work together in a collaborative and coordinated effort for disaster response. The media, I think we're all in that boat. We all get our own awareness from what the news is reporting. And of course, social media that Sean touched on. We start keeping close eyes on Twitter feeds, Facebook, and other social media. So a few misconceptions, and some of these I've kind of hit on already. The declared communications emergency. Some years ago, this was a possibility. If there was a major event, declared communications emergency, designate certain frequencies for use during the emergency. This is no longer the case. There are no designated frequencies. Every frequency is kind of a first come, first serve. However, there are some frequencies that, through common knowledge, we know certain activities happen. 14320, 7268, 14300, to name a few. HQ is operational. As I mentioned earlier, headquarters operates normal business hours. We have to factor that into anything headquarters does to assist with response. We're not staffed 24/7 either. We will be a request. As Sean put it, that's why we got PIOs and PICs. The real yeoman's work of working with the media is out in the field organization with our PI and PICs. Local and state VOAD conference calls. Now, say state VOADs, New York, the New York area has got a large VOAD organization. During Sandy, they would organize conference calls at the state level, state VOAD level. These are ones that typically headquarters won't be participating. Make sure that your section staff have the information to participate in those state VOAD conference calls. They're very important to find out what our other partners are doing and where the shortcomings are. Sometimes you may have never worked with may have a need that we can assist with. So it's very important to start coordinating with all the other partners at the state level. And last second request, I always bring this up. During a hurricane, we got a request for handmade equipment as the storm was making landfall. This is typically an impossible request to fulfill because a lot of this stuff via air cargo. Now, in this particular case, we were very fortunate because of a VOAD conference, a national VOAD conference call that the league was on by another organization who had somebody who was getting ready to head to the affected area by vehicle, and they were able to take with them. So that was probably a 1 in a million shot that something like that would happen, but the last second requests are very difficult to fulfill. Okay, kind of wraps up my side of it. I did get a few questions that kind of came in for me. Let's see, can headquarters use offers of unique equipment such as air and land mobile masts? We take those on, it's case by case. So we have to be careful on how much donated items we take. We don't have a lot of room for storage. Tell me if you've got something in mind, and then we can discuss it from there. We definitely don't want to get into the idea of taking a lot of used equipment or stuff you've been schlepping from hams for a while, that can get into a problem. The contact list will be put up shortly. The ARRL headquarters WinLink address, W1AW at winlink.org, is the best bet to go to headquarters. Keep in mind that we are, as staff, we have to also be very aware of getting on the air during work hours. That's another factor that we have to kind of keep in mind. How can section emergency coordinators leverage knowledge and best practices gained by headquarters? Definitely participating in things like this, hearing headquarters presentation, section conventions and hamfests, definitely helpful. We try to post as much as we can on what we experience, and also take a look at the monthly that are now being posted online. That also gives some insight as to what's going on. We've done some after action reports on headquarters activities as well. Okay, so we're going to leave this up here for a little while. Contact information for each of our presenters, and I believe we're generally caught up with the questions. So I'm going to kind of pass the mic around to our presenters and see if they've got any closing comments before we end the webinar tonight. Bob, V1 MBR, you're up first. Any final comments? Okay, maybe you had to step away from the computer. Julio, tonight.
Is that me, Mike?
Yep.
Okay, this is Julio W. I would just like to thank everybody that participated tonight, and to please participate when we have hurricanes out of the Atlantic, Caribbean, Pacific when we are activated, because even though you may not be in the affected area, you can be extremely important when you can relay a station we cannot hear. Here, sometimes the skip goes right over us and we don't hear a thing, and then someone up in Illinois it could be an S9 signal, Aruba or Barbados, that we cannot hear, and that relay could be vital to bring those reports back to the Hurricane Center so we know what's going on at the ground level. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating tonight.
Okay, thank you, Julio. And just a reminder, I did send a note out through the, as far as slide presentations, that's up to each presenter, and contact them directly if you're interested in slide sets, and the entire webinar will be posted to YouTube later. Okay, thank you, Julio. And Sean mentioned to me that he had to kind of step away for a moment, so he would pass at the end. And Robbie, any final comments?
Okay, I just want to thank everyone for their attendance tonight, and the hurricanes. And this season may be a bit more active. It's a little more active last year, maybe more active still this season. So now's the time. Prepare your home, and Bobby Graves gave some great comments there, and then figure out and prepare about how you can best help during or for that matter, as we talked about, other tropical systems that are either less than hurricanes but still have significant impacts in terms of flooding and or severe weather, or systems that are hurricanes that transition into larger post-tropical systems that can also cause quite a bit of damage and flooding and all the different impacts. The reporting is very helpful to the Hurricane Center for Hurricanes, and also to the local offices, both in tropical systems. I really think this is one of the best ways that we can contribute when communications are still functional, and then you can segue providing those communications when things start to fail if we're kind of relevant when those communication means are there, providing that situational awareness or intelligence information. So, and again, we're looking for some net controls for the VoIP Hurricane Net. If you're interested, you can email me at the contact info. We can see if we can bring you in, again, not just for net activations, but for our prep net every Saturday evening U.S. time as well. So thanks again for the opportunity to present. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And Bobby, any final comments?
Yeah, Mike, well, first off, thanks to you and ARRL for sponsoring this webinar tonight, and to everyone who joined us. One final comment is a lot of people may wonder why in this day and age of satellite technology and hurricane hunters going out into the storms, and even with this brand new satellite, just recently went up earlier this year and going into operation. I think it goes 16. It's giving information. I think everything fantastic information. Why do we need storm spotters or even during hurricanes? Well, it's just like with your local Skywarn program. See, stuff is just great. It helps the forecasters do a great job and give better forecasts. But keep this in mind. Nothing beats the human eye, the man on the ground or the woman on the ground, the forecaster. This is what I'm actually seeing right here, just like with Doppler radar during tornado season. It may or may not show that tornado, but I've seen a lot of tornado on the ground, and the Doppler may not show it. And having eyes on the ground will help get that warning out to possibly help save lives. So the reports that you give, the information they're getting from the hurricane hunters and the satellite imagery may show, well, the storm may be going at this particular direction. Well, due to your data that you give, may help them realize we're actually moving a little bit further south than I thought, and it's actually a little bit stronger than we thought, or maybe vice versa. So every report that we get is vital, and those the forecasters appreciate it, and so do we. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. And Bill, last up for any final comments?
Speakers have said. Oops, there we are. I want to echo what a number of other speakers have already said, and everybody for having taken the time to participate in this webinar this evening. It's very much appreciated. I also want to invite folks to participate in SATERN's daily and weekly nets, particularly our digital net. We're always looking for new digital operators on that net, which meets on noon Central Time on 14.065. Information about all of our nets is available on our website, www.org. And you don't have to be in SATERN, you don't have to be a member of the Salvation Army or anything else to participate. Everybody's welcome. So again, thanks everyone for participating tonight. It was great talking to you all.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And I want to thank all of our presenters tonight for some great information. We've been doing this now for about 6 years, and it's been every year a great learning opportunity. Everyone for taking part in this year's hurricane webinar, and thank you for your service and your commitment to your communities. As we do each year for hurricane season, we prepare for the worst and we hope for the best. Here's to it being a quiet and safe year for our communities. Thank you for attending, and on behalf of the presenters, 73, everybody.